The boy who wrote letters to save a library. In a small town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of wildflowers, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was a quiet child with a curious mind and a heart brimming with dreams. The town itself was unremarkable at first glance: a scattering of homes, a bakery that filled the air with the scent of fresh bread, a park where children played, and at the center of it all, the old brick library. This library, with its weathered steps and tall arched windows, was Ethan's favorite place in the world. Ethan's love for stories began on rainy afternoons, when he would sit curled up in a corner of the library as thunder rumbled outside. Mrs. Whittle, the kindly librarian, would smile at the boy who seemed to devour books faster than anyone else. She would recommend stories of faraway lands, brave adventurers, and clever children. Ethan would lose himself in the pages, his imagination soaring beyond the boundaries of his small town. But not everyone shared Ethan's passion for the library. Over the years, the town had grown busier. More people shopped online, watched television, or scrolled through their phones. Fewer children came to the library after school. Town meetings were filled with talk of budgets and priorities. The library, once the proud heart of the community, had begun to fade into the background. One chilly autumn morning, Ethan overheard his parents talking in hushed voices over breakfast. There was trouble, they said. The town council was considering closing the library for good. It was too expensive, they argued, and too few people used it. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. Closing the library? He couldn't imagine his world without it. He rushed to the library after school, finding Mrs. Whittle shelving books as usual. She tried to smile, but Ethan could see the worry in her eyes. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice trembling. Mrs. Whittle nodded. "The council will vote at the end of the month. If they close us down, the books will be packed away. The building might be sold." "I'm sorry, Ethan." Ethan felt something inside him shift, a determination he'd never known before. He couldn't let his beloved library disappear. But what could a single boy do? That night, as he sat at his desk, Ethan stared at a blank sheet of paper. He thought of all the stories he'd read, the lessons he'd learned, the adventures he'd lived within those walls. He picked up his pen and began to write. He wrote a letter to the town council, pouring his heart onto the page. He wrote about how the library was more than a building. It was a place where ideas lived, where lonely people found comfort, where children discovered who they could become. He wrote about Mrs. Whittle, who always had a kind word and a new book to recommend. He wrote about the magic of stories and the power of imagination. But when he finished, Ethan realized that one letter would not be enough. The council needed to hear from everyone who loved the library. So, the next day at school, Ethan shared his plan with his classmates. He stood in front of the class, his hands trembling but his voice strong. "They want to close the library," he said. "But we can do something. Write a letter, tell them what the library means to you." Some of the kids laughed. Others shrugged. But a few listened. After school, Ethan sat in the cafeteria with his best friend, Maya, writing letters together. Word began to spread. The teachers heard what was happening and encouraged students to share their stories. Parents joined in, recalling their own memories of the library. Soon, Ethan was collecting stacks of letters, some written in careful cursive, others in messy, crayon-scrawled handwriting. There were letters from children, teenagers, adults, and even a few from people who had moved away but remembered the library fondly. Ethan didn't stop there. He visited the bakery, where Mrs. Hernandez agreed to put a letter-writing station by the counter. At the park, he set up a table with paper and pens, inviting passers-by to write. He even convinced the local radio host to let him speak on air, sharing his story and encouraging the town to help. Every evening, Ethan sorted through the letters, reading each one. Some were funny, some were sad, and some were filled with hope. One letter from an elderly man named Mr. Jacobs read, "The library was the first place I felt welcome when I moved here 50 years ago. It's where I learned English, made friends, and found a sense of belonging." Another letter from a single mother said, "The library is where my son learned to read. It's our safe place." Finally, the day of the council meeting arrived. The town hall was packed. People lined the walls, clutching their letters. Ethan sat in the front row, his hands sweating, a folder of letters on his lap. The council members listened as Mrs. Whittle spoke. She talked about the library's history, its programs, its impact on the community. Then, Ethan stood. Despite his nerves, he stepped forward and faced the council. "I collected these letters," he said, his voice steady. "They're from people who love the library. People who need it. Please, read them. Listen to what they have to say." He handed the folder to the council president. Silence filled the room as people waited. The council members began to read, their expressions changing as they absorbed the heartfelt words. After what felt like an eternity, the council president stood. He cleared his throat. "We've heard from many of you tonight. And we've read these letters. It's clear that the library is more than just a building. It's a part of who we are as a community. I move that we keep the library open." Cheers erupted. People hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Mrs. Whittle smiled through her tears, wrapping Ethan in a warm embrace. The library was saved. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. People started coming back to the library. New programs were launched: story hours, art classes, reading clubs. The library became alive with laughter, conversation, and learning. Ethan continued to volunteer, helping Mrs. Whittle and organizing events. The experience changed Ethan. He realized that even a single voice, when joined with others, could make a difference. He learned the power of community, of standing up for what you believe in, and of the written word. Years later, when Ethan had grown into a young man, he would walk by the library and smile. The old brick building stood stronger than ever, a beacon of hope and imagination. And inside, children still curled up in corners, lost in the magic of stories. Ethan's story spread beyond the town. Other communities heard about the boy who wrote letters to save a library. They were inspired to protect their own libraries, to cherish the places where stories lived. The lesson was simple, yet profound. One person, no matter how young or small, can spark a movement. Words have the power to unite, to heal, to build a better world. When we come together, we can turn the page to a brighter future. And so, the little town between the hills and the wildflowers was forever changed, not just because a library was saved, but because a boy believed that stories could change the world, and inspired others to believe the same.